let us take you to the place inside your mind where thoughts divide and mysteries unwind. Join us every Monday evening right here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And you will catch the Fenton Perspective with our great host, Lorian Fenton. Come listen in as she shares her amazing stories from the past to present, along with all of her guest secrets to the future. That's the Fenton Perspective every Monday evening right here from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time, only on Revolution Radio. Oh, and you don't need to expect us. We're already here.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hello, everybody. Oops, got some noise.
Hey, Steve.
Welcome to. Oh,
hey, Len, are you
right on set, please.
I'm in the middle of an interview right now. I can't talk to you right now.
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye. Okay.
Okay, everybody. Hi. Welcome to Stargate to the Cosmos. I'm your host, Janet Lessin, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha, Alex Lessin, and our producer is Thomas Becker, also known as a Mad Painter. You're listening to Revolution Radio, Studio B, and our guest today is author Len Kasten. And Len's been with us many times, and he's written for Atlantis Rising magazine and New Dawn magazine, and he's published a number of books, including The Secret History of Extraterrestrials, Secret Journey to Planet Circle, which was on the Publisher's Top 20 list for more than 2 years. And he published Alien World Order, the Reptilian Plan to Divide and Conquer the Human Race in 2017. But his newest book is Dark Fleet, the Secret Nazi Space Program and the Battle for the Solar System. And that was published March 10th of 2020. And so I'm going to let Len tell you more about it. It's all this is up on my website at aquarianradio.com. There's pictures and links and more information about Len and the book. And Sasha, what would you like to say before we bring Len on?
I find your stuff really exciting, and of course it's totally true that the title of your last book, it seems that the reptilian plan to divide the world has occurred.
Yeah.
So Len, welcome, and is this plan working here?
Good. Nice to be with you.
Nice to have you back. It's been too long, but we'll enjoy our now.
Are you locked down in Scottsdale?
Oh yeah, we are here. We're shut down, but not by decree though. It hasn't been an official decree by the governor. No. How about you? What's going on?
Decreed and locked down.
What's going on?
If you go out and you don't have a good reason.
Curfew.
In Maui, if you don't have a good reason for being out, you can get the fine of $5,000 and up to a year in prison. And now they've issued a curfew. I forget what the curfew is. I don't go at it anyway.
Just at night.
Just at night.
From midnight till.
But what's happened is where we are in Wailuku, Kahului area, that is the epicenter of all the islands of Hawaii. So more people are dying in our neighborhood than anywhere else in Hawaiian Islands. I don't even know if you're aware of it, but that's
not true.
Yes, it is.
On Oahu.
Nope. Maui's the epicenter. We have anyway. It's a big controversy, so even we don't agree on it. But
How many?
It's
How many?
fun.
How many?
We're having a lot of fun.
How many deaths have there been?
Let me pull that up. Here we go. I'll pull that up. We have over 500 cases in the Hawaiian Islands. You know that Princess Cruise dropped off and went to all the islands, and then she went over to San Francisco and was stuck in harbor for a week, and had a lot of people were proving positive. So we knew. I mean, I knew it was coming because we already got polluted. I'm pulling up the site, but it'll take a moment before it refreshes. Last I looked, there was like 504 positives and about, I don't know. I don't want to quote the wrong thing. I'll pull it up in just a minute. It'll come up. But yeah, we're having a lot of things going on. How does that correlate with your latest book? Do you have information on? Is this part of like the alien agenda to control the population? Is this, what have you found in your research?
Actually, this goes back to an article I wrote for Atlantis Rising several years ago. It's probably the closest relationship to this whole thing. It was an article. Let's see. It was an article about the World Health Organization that I wrote, and talking about the AIDS virus and the fact that was a conspiracy. So I've been talking about it for quite a while, actually.
Yeah. So, yeah, we can hear you. So
I'm cutting in and out. No.
You're cutting in and out, though. But
really?
So what are your thoughts on what this is about? What is the conspiracy? Tell us more about.
Well, I don't know. I haven't identified. I thought you could tell me. I thought you'd have more information about it than me.
Well, it just seems obvious that from one level of game playing that President Trump would use any pretext or whatever was coming along to prolong his time in office, and being able to close the post office and have, as he the most honest thing he ever said is we can't allow voting by mail because the Republicans will never hold the office again, and so it's so that we have this basically a government that's being run for the king, and that's what's happening now, and the people that finance the king, which are the people that you have identified as the descendants, the cultural continuation of the Nazi regime that has indeed taken over the planet and is in space, and is is some of the major players among the fleet players in space too.
And they're obviously terraforming the planet for their own species, because the way the environment is going with all the pollution and fossil fuels and everything is going to be unbreathable, intolerable for human life. So the people that are perishing from this coronavirus are those that are compromised, and part of the compromise, like the Black and brown cultures are being subjected to lots of pollution in their environment. So they get all the factories and the toxins get located in their zip codes, and they're dying at the rate of 70% to the rest will be white and other mixes. So that's one of the things I'm looking at is. Well,
I would think Trump would be pleased about that, because they are the largest voting bloc in some of the key states. So if there's more of them dying, then less of them are going to be voting.
Right. He's uneager to succor them, giving more money, which will keep everybody poor and in debt for a long time to come after this is over, even, and not really being able to give people who now have been living day to day that they don't make money today, they don't eat tonight. We've got to help everybody that's here, and everybody needs to be able to have access to health during this crisis. It's so obvious to any thinking person that denying this is a conscious act of genocide.
and then the encouragement to get out and party and have the Mardi Gras and the spring break, and that just exposes more people. So it seems like the herd, what do you call it? The herd, what's it called? Herd? Oh, they're trying to pollute the world with the virus. And what's it called, honey?
You want to say that's an immunization response, but I think it's a fallacy.
No, there's a word. Well, what they're doing is exposing everybody to the virus, and then the old people and the compromised will die. Kind of like what the
culling.
They did in the culling, what they did with in Nazi Germany with Hitler. He threw the old people out the window and killed off the young and So anyway, there's so many theories, but we want to know what your book says and what your ideas are. We can go on and on. We talk about this all the time. We're stuck in the house with 3 cats and a couple cats in the yard, so we're kind of like, running around. What's going on? Who's going to be?
We're all stuck in the house. Everybody's stuck in the house. So.
Right.
Huh?
So I always go. I go into the what's going on with the extraterrestrials. Who's going to inherit the planet that we're all gone? Now I like how the animals are coming into the different cities. They're just walking around. I saw rhinos going down the street and elephants and deer and sheep. Like people recording all over the world. Their empty streets are being inhabited by. So if we were all to die, I think the animals would just. If they didn't die too, they would just come in and take back the planet. So that's good. Life will go on. It'll be life without us. But we're not going to all die. This is obviously a calling in the population.
Yeah, it's a complicated situation. I think that definitely the reptilians are behind it, though. The reptilians and the Illuminati are behind it, and I think they're basically trying to get ready for the robotic takeover.
Yeah.
Right. And so what do you think? How are they doing that? We had Alfred Weber on last week, and that was an interesting perspective. But what's your theory? We like to hear different theories.
About what?
Well, the Dark Fleet. Tell our listeners, what is the Dark Fleet? Who are the Dark Fleet? What's the secret Nazi program? 20 and back and Operation Paperclip, all these things, because this all ties in to what's going on.
My book talks about the fact that the Nazis did not disappear after World War II. They took over. They took over Mars and the Moon, and they're still very much around and very much in power. And they're running the show here on Earth from that point of view, because they've got incredible technology on the Moon and on Mars, and they're not letting us have it here on Earth.
So what kind of technology do they have on the Moon? I had a whistleblower contact me recently, and he hasn't gotten back to me yet. He's going to flesh out his story. But he said when he died, he got hit by a car on his bike, and he found himself on the far side of the Moon. And he was looking at 2 cylinders, and they're very tall, like and one cylinder was full of reptilian forms, and the other one was full. It was like 2 towers, right? And the other one was full of humanoid forms. And so he's talking to this tall mantis gray type being, and it's saying, "We'll see that one in there. That's your avatar, and see that one on the other tower full of reptilians. One was humanoid. He said, that's your avatar too." So this guide was telling him, "You have many avatars." And so next thing you know, he was back on Earth, and he was being revived, and so he was alive again. And then he said he died a month later because he had a lot of damage to his body, and the same thing happened. He had to review, and they said, "Oh, well, you had, your body was really damaged." So they fixed it, and they sent him back to the Earth. So he's still here, and I'm going to have him on eventually. But are there things like that going on the Moon? Do they have a place where souls gather? Is it all just technology? What are you finding?
Well, it's technology, absolutely. They have tremendous technology. The Dark Fleet operates off of the Moon, but the center of the Nazi presence there is on Mars, at this place called the Cybernetics Laboratory on Mars, where they're so far ahead of us that it would take us hundreds of years to catch up. But that's deliberate to keep us in the dark while they have developed the incredible technology. In fact, I have
How did you find out about it? If it's a secret, how did you find out about it?
Well, mostly through the super soldiers. I mean, you should know about that too, because you've talked to several of them. You've talked to many of them yourself, haven't you? Randy Kramer.
Yeah, I know.
Penny Bradley, all of them.
Yeah, and so, yes, all of them. Yeah, but I want you to tell our listeners that.
Well, because they were
about the super soldiers.
They were at your conference in Albuquerque. Penny Bradley was there, and so was Randy, and Randy Kramer was there. I had a long discussion. With Randy there.
Yeah, he's a great source of information. So, what did they tell you about the cybernetics lab?
Well, the key person on the cybernetics lab was Ilyana Kapulnik. Have you heard of her? She was.
Yes,
we know her.
Yeah.
Have you interviewed her?
Been a while, a couple years, maybe 3 or 4 years. So you probably don't have later information than I do. What did she tell you?
Well, she was on Mars for 50 years. They took her there when she was 4 years old as a language specialist. And so she was on a 50 and back program. And she worked at the cybernetics lab there as a language specialist because she had a facility for language, and they needed somebody who could work with all the different languages that come and go on the moon and Mars. Not only from Earth, but from all over the solar system. And she was very adept at that. That's why they kidnapped her. And she spent 50 years there in the cybernetics laboratory that was connected to the ICC base on Mars. The ICC base, so you know what that is, right?
What's that stand for again? International Corporate Conglomerate?
Intergalactic Corporate Conglomerate.
Yeah, Intergalactic Corporate Conglomerate, yes.
That's basically their Washington, D.C. That's their version of that's their capital. That's basically the Nazi capital on Mars, and therefore on the Mars and Moon both. And they have a cybernetics laboratory connected to the ICC base, and she worked there. And their main occupation or preoccupation at the cybernetics lab was creating cyborgs. That's mainly what they did.
Right. So how do they create the cyborgs? From what I've heard is they take a human, they fracture them into their subpersonalities, and so some humans will find one of their fractals or subpersonalities operating a ship, and the ship is tied into the human brain, and so they're somehow interwoven with the AI in the ships, and they're the navigators. Is that correct, or do you have another perspective on what I'm trying to summarize here?
Well, they have a piece of human consciousness, and then they have all the electronics on top of it, and they're trained to obey orders, and they can become an instant army or an instant fighting force. So they sell them. So the Nazis are selling them all over the galaxy. They got a very brisk trade in cyborgs. As a matter of fact, I talked about that in my book about about World War II, because I became convinced that the Wehrmacht, the German army, was basically a cyborg army, essentially. That it was really a cloned army. But at that time, I didn't really understand that they were cyborgs. But now looking back, I can see that they probably were cyborgs because they were trained just to obey orders.
But Ed, what I remember so well is that you said there weren't that many healthy, trained German youth that could possibly be there. Where did these come from?
Exactly. And the reptilians were created down below the surface of this planet and on the Moon and Mars. Well, they actually at that point, no, they did not. They did not have colonies on the Moon and Mars during World War II. No, that came later. I'm sorry. So
when did the colonies?
That was from Antarctica. Yeah.
When did the colonies start? When did they begin?
60s. Well, the first Nazi trip to the moon was 1942. So from that point on, they started burrowing beneath the surface, and expanding the surface on the moon. And right now
it's they get the technology to get to the moon in 1942. Was that alien technology? Were they talking to aliens, or had they invented it themselves?
They developed the technology at Antarctica, really, basically. Do you know about the whole Antarctica story? I think, don't you?
Yeah, if you could just explain a little bit of that to our listeners, that'd be great.
Well, the base in Antarctica was called Base 211, and it started in 1938 with the sailing of the ship, the Schwabenland. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, we're familiar with this. Is the people that are listening aren't necessarily.
I'm sorry?
We'd like you telling all the details.
Our listeners aren't aware of this, so if you just give them the background, that'd be excellent.
Okay.
Because they don't know it.
Okay. Well, the Schwabenland sailed from Germany to Antarctica in 1938. That was the year before World War II even started. And they had all the scientists, agriculturists. They had a complete cross-section of the German military, the German technology on that ship. And they located these huge caverns under the ice and started the colony in Antarctica in 1938. Even though they were about to declare war on Poland a year later, they traveled 6,000 miles across the Atlantic to establish the colony in Antarctica, which they named New Schwabenland. Now, I thought you knew that, didn't you?
In your research, did they encounter any other? Some of my sources say that they were accepted by old Germans in Bodland who allowed them to settle there and were allied with them and were provident of the anti-grav craft. And it wasn't just German manufactured stuff based on the plans of the Vril sisters or anything, but that they were actually assisted in protection by the king of Bodland. I don't know how much credit to give to this stuff, but there's this whole other train of what was going on under Antarctica.
I think you're talking about the book Genesis. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah,
yes, exactly.
I read the book. I don't know how much to attribute to that particular book. It's a very interesting book. It takes the position that there was an ancient German civilization already in Antarctica, right? Living under the ice already. Right. And they were still very much there was a very large city there at that point.
Right. So this whole tale, this book was slipped to me by an insider who someone who, like Stewart, had access to all kinds of CIA and other materials, and he told me to look at this. This is pretty close to the real thing, he said, and so I really gave it a lot of attention.
Right, and then there's this story about the reptilian base. It was already under Antarctica, and they apparently had the cigar-shaped craft, and that they were interacting with the Nazis as well. So, what do you know about the reptilians and the Nazis?
Well, that's the reason that the Germans went on that trip and took that voyage was because of their connection with the reptilians. It was the reptilians that convinced them to go there. I mean, why else would they have traveled 6,000 miles across the Atlantic with a boat full of scientists and military people if it hadn't been because of their connection with the reptilians? We know the reptilians were already there. They were already on Antarctica. So it was because of their connection, that Hitler's deal with the reptilians, that took place.
So what I'm missing in this story is, how did the reptilians and the Nazis find each other? Or did the reptilians, were they native to the Earth reptilians, or were they interstellar reptilians? That's the piece I'm missing. What do you know?
Well, they were native to the Earth, of course, but they still can travel anywhere in the galaxy from here, from underground. They've traveled through portals, and they were still space explorers, even though they were living underground here on Earth. They had an incredible civilization underneath the Earth. And that was the deal that they made with Hitler.
Dracos. They made a deal with Hitler. So somehow the reptilians encountered Hitler, but then apparently the Draco force is an external non-terrestrial force. There's like the Draco reptilians, and there's the indigenous reptilians native to the Earth. That's what I get part of this story. So we have a couple of different reptilian factions that we're dealing with.
Well, or the way that some people have put this story is that it was a breakaway from the Draco empire, and that the princess who was head Draco here was independent, and she was capable of allying herself with Earthling factions, and as far as the Dracos in the stuff that Stuart Swerdlow read came to Earth and settled Lemuria from the moon, which they hollowed out from their bases inside Venus. And they settled first Lemuria, which is Maui and Hawaii here, the tip of this continent. And then later it's the Atlanteans, and they fought wars. They went underground, and they wound up with this big stronghold in Antarctica. So they were there. They knew exactly what was going on by Stuart's thing.
Yeah, the first reptilian settlement here was about 1 million years ago. Actually, they were here before we were. They were here before humans were here on this planet. Supposedly, according to Sverdlow, this was a water planet completely covered with water when they first arrived here. And they dried it out. They terraformed it, dried it out, and brought the moon here from a distant galaxy, positioned it where it is so they could use it as a stepping stone. They did all that before there were any humans on this planet, but we did have humans on Mars and on a planet called Maldek in this solar system. So the humans were really here first in this solar system, but not on this planet.
That's right. We got to get along.
And
so
then they just,
what are the names of the chapters of your book, if you could maybe, because we didn't get the book in time. What are the names of the chapters of your new book?
The chapters, the names of them? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
It's like, it's like that's the outline of the story. And so when we ask an author to just go through the outline of their chapters, the story it's all there.
Okay, I can do that if you want. Sure.
Give it a try.
Part 1 was focused really on the Germans on this planet, on the history of the Germans, going back to Bismarck and going through the Kaiser, and then talking about how they eventually, how the Nazi Party got started, and brought Hitler to power. So that's the first part of the book. The titles are the.
Now, did you?
Yeah.
I want to go a little bit. A question on that. I was reading the Peter Moon books, and he describes a chapter where, what was his name? The magician. God, forgetting his name. He went to the pyramid and he had sex with the modern incarnation
Crowley.
of Nana. What's his name?
Aleister Crowley.
Aleister Crowley, right? And then they brought forth, somehow they brought forth the timeline where Hitler was going to be like the character that brought forth the Nazi regime. Did you ever read that story? That was part of Peter Moon, who interviewed Swerdlow, wrote about the Montauk books.
I read one of Peter Moon's books. I can't remember which one it was, but I placed a lot of credit. I think that Stuart Sverdlow was very credible, and I placed a lot of emphasis on his writings. And that was in my last book. I covered that in my last book, Alien World Order, which I think you read, didn't you? I believe you did.
Yes.
Alien world order. Anyway, the reason I devoted so much space in the first part of the book to the Nazi development of the Nazi Party was because I wanted to really hone in on where they came from, what their origins were of the Nazi Party, and how the cruelty that they demonstrated in World War II really went back to the colonial era when they settled in Africa and when they committed the first genocide on this planet by slaughtering all of the Herero natives in German West Africa. And that was still considered to this day, the first genocide of the 20th century. I wanted to get that done so that when I talked about them going to the moon and Mars, the psychology of what they were all about was established. And that's why I spent time on that in the early part of the book.
So they commit genocide as a matter of policy.
What's that?
Genocide is among the policies, things they just do as part of who they are.
Well, in order to explain that, though, I had to talk about the archons and how the archons were connected with the Nazis, and were really motivating them from within. So I spent a lot of time talking about that in the early part of the book, before I talked about their Antarctica and the moon and Mars.
So the archons are walk-ins, or how do they do it?
The archons are a group of entities that were talked about in the Gnostic teachings. Do you know anything about the Gnostics at all?
Then we know a lot of this stuff, but my listeners don't. So you introduce Gnostics, you got to tell everybody what you mean by that.
Okay. Well, the archons really are controlled by the reptilians, because the archons are expert at invading the human mind, and that's what they're good at. And they control the human mind. And the reptilians really use them like AI. It's their form of AI. Wherever they go, they bring in the archons to run the whole show. And they can literally run a whole solar system from a quantum computer using the archons. And I wanted to establish that in the early part of the book. You know John Lash? Have you ever talked about John Lash? I heard about him.
I've heard about him, but I'm not real familiar what he's presenting.
But I just love what you're saying so far. It's like the Fox News of the galaxy. Archonic communication to our brains.
If you remember the series called Battlestar Galactica on television.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
And if you recall that the Cylons were a race of basically a race of automatons that had already taken over 12 solar systems, and the last human colony had to get off the planet to avoid being taken over by the Cylons. And the Cylons were basically AI run by a quantum computer. And all I did was connect them with the reptilians, which they are connected with, because the reptilians are in control. They control the archons. They use them for mind control wherever they go. They use them for AI wherever they go. And the reptilians run 21 star systems in this part of the galaxy. I think you already had that information, right?
Right.
Right. So in Galactica, Battlestar Galactica, the ones that were AI didn't know that they weren't human for a while.
Some didn't know and some did know.
Some knew and some did not know. But by the end of the story, they all knew. It was eventually revealed that they all the ones that were AI, they found out who they were. Then they had to deal with that because they had the ability to love and fall in love. And
it's the same thing that happens to our super soldiers that we debrief too. They find all their parts, start finding each other.
Right.
Oh, I don't. What? Tell me again about that. I'm not sure exactly how that ties in. Just explain that to me for a moment.
Basically, they shatter people into alters, is what Janet was saying, and at some point, there are different parts of somebody who's going deeper, meditating on their experiences in the Dark Fleet or wherever they were in. They start to feel all their parts, their history, and their simultaneous existences, where clones of them parts of them are operating, and they realize they're all resonating with inner parts of them, their inner subpersonalities, and they all have something to contribute. And when that happens, a person comes together in great wisdom, and that's what seems to happen with reflective people who have been through this.
Well, that's exactly what Penny Bradley said. Did you talk to her at length at the conference with Penny Bradley?
We've interviewed Penny several times, and Penny will go into many different variations on the theme and different threads. So she's very knowledgeable.
Well, she claims she had 38 alters, and it's been taking her all this time to put them back together again into one consciousness. And each time the Nazis split off another alter. An alter has to have some degree of consciousness or it can't operate. And
that's right.
So I think she's still doing that, isn't she? Putting them all back together again, even at her advanced stage.
Right, that's going to be a lifelong process for her. That's going to be a lifelong process. Someone who has that many alters, it takes a long time to integrate everybody and get everybody in.
How old is she now? How old is Penny Bradley now?
I'm not sure her exact age. I'm 66. I think she's a little bit younger than me. We're somewhere around the same age.
Well, she was on Mars for, I believe it was 40 years, right?
Yeah, they go 20 years and they come back and they get regressed, and so they're simultaneously living several lives, because they're living lives in between lives. So they'll come back and they'll be in their human life, and they'll go to school, and then in between they get sent to Mars. And a lot of people apparently are having to integrate these lives between lives.
I devoted a whole chapter. I devoted a whole chapter about Penny Bradley in my book.
Oh, great!
Great, yeah, Penny's awesome.
I'll read to you what the beginning part, what I said in the very first part of the chapter. I said, every country that has nuclear weapons is part of the program. Earth is not being run for humanity, but for the elites, and they are planning on leaving. They think they will be spared because they are allied with the Draco. Not likely. Penny Bradley. She goes further than that. She says Mars is basically a German planet. They run the whole planet. They wanted to be in a German-speaking world, and they weren't very happy in Antarctica, so they put their headquarters on Mars. Anyway, her story is a good. I devoted a whole chapter to her story because of how she was basically first abducted, and what she had to go through, the horrors they put her through. But eventually, she became a pilot in the Dark Fleet because she proved that she could handle it. She was able to handle it mentally, and she was really a very sharp pilot in the Dark Fleet on Mars. Well, the Dark Fleet is on the moon, actually, but she was getting into it and liking it, enjoying it, actually. But she had to go through a horrible, horrible existence before that happened. Have you talked to her at any detail about what happened with her?
Absolutely, yes. We have indeed.
Yeah, so they use very naturally telepathic, and so she's able to communicate with the ship. The ships are conscious sentient beings, and they kind of go into a symbiotic relationship, and that's why certain people are selected in the different 20 back programs for their abilities. So there was one fellow we interviewed. I don't remember his name right now, but he disappeared because people sometimes they come out of the closet and they start talking on these radio shows, and then they get scared and they go back undercover again. So he was explaining how he was a communicator with extraterrestrials, so they would bring different ETs in, and he would be able to kind of integrate what they were saying and download it, and then he would go to his superior and he would upload the information that he downloaded from the ET, like a translator. Some people are translators.
The Canadian fellow.
What was his name? What was his name?
Right now, I don't remember.
We got him in the archives, so we'll get it.
He's in my archives. I can look it up
But,
later.
well, he said basically, he said, why are you choosing me? He said, because you're wearing this ring that you're somebody or other shared that he was a Mason, and so that's why we own you.
Right. Apparently, if you're in the Masons, you're part of it.
Yeah.
You've signed up whether you realize or not, just because of your genetics.
Well, I mentioned 10 super soldiers in the first part of the book in the introduction. Maybe was he one of these? I mentioned Penny Bradley, James Casbold, Randy Kramer, Ileana Kapolnik, Michael Relf, James Rink, Tony Rodriguez, Max Spears, Kevin Trimble, and Anthony Zinder. Do you know any of those other people?
Trimble.
That was true.
It's Trimble. Trimble is the guy who was chosen because he's empathetic to the messages, and so he sort of reads people. And he's a translator of what it is that the prisoners were communicating. It's Trimble.
Okay, yeah, he was he's a very smart guy, and I was very impressed with him. But I put down, at least I gave the names of those 10 super soldiers. There are a lot more. Those are the ones that Rink. Yeah. Now, what do you know about James Rink? You had him at your conference too. Do you remember James Rink?
Yeah, I talked to James periodically. He's wonderful. He's very knowledgeable. He's a wealth of information. He seems
his website, his super soldier website, is very helpful. It was very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Elena is an incredible genius. I just almost anything she says is just like I'm in awe of how what an informational person she is.
Yeah, Ileana Kapolnik.
Yeah.
She goes by Ileana. She goes by Elena. She goes by Ileana also. Yeah, she's amazing. She truly is amazing. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Did you have her?
You talked to what stood out? What's the most credible thing that they've said?
Did you have her as a guest?
In your mind?
Yes.
I did years ago.
Okay. Well, she was on Mars for 50 years.
She was engraved. Oh my gosh, she was a trainer, training these guys to see who could swim the longest before they drowned, and she had to kill these guys, and they recognized each other on one of our shows. I think it was amazing.
Well, I knew she was a language specialist. I didn't know she did anything physical, but they valued her for her language abilities.
She was like a commander, a trainee, a drill sergeant.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
she did.
A lot of people on, and then some of them, I forget which one. They say, "Oh, take my story off." Like they come out and they do the interviews, like, "Oh, I don't want." So I don't know if they get threatened later or something's going on there. So
when she returned to Earth, after her 50-year period on Mars as a trainer or whatever, her father, she was a young girl again here, and she found that she was a sharpshooter, and she was an expert with an axe and with all kinds of weaponry that most young girls on Earth normally do not have those skills. and her father couldn't figure out where she got them from.
Wow.
How did you learn to do all that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
She didn't know where she got them either.
What they discovered on one of my shows is that they were being used for different things. Like, I think it was Elena. It could have been somebody else, but let's just say Elena for now. That she was testing the other people, which these are pretty horrendous. And it's like, how was she able to? She tossed these people into.
You were seeing who would live longer, whether they were blood type A or blood type B or blood type O, and they learned tricks, and like if they could hold on to each other, that was one of the messages. They lasted longer, but in the end, they all drowned anyway.
So they would drown, and then for them, death is not an option. So yeah, you can drown. You go through all the horrors of dying, and
they revive you.
You get revived, and so I was
they
like,
put them in the regeneration tank. Penny said she died 5 times, and she wanted to die. She wanted to die because she didn't want to stay here anymore, but she couldn't. They keep bringing her back into consciousness again.
Yeah.
She told us about the spiders that ate her.
Oh, she got eaten by spider. Yeah. So for the super soul, it's not fun. Death is not an option. They say
exactly.
Oh,
I have that in the book. That's all in the book. It's all in my book.
Yes.
Wow, it's going to be a hot book.
It sounds great. So but
Ileana was on Mars for 50 years, and her main job there was working in the cybernetics laboratory at the ICC base. And so she was involved with the cyborgs, creating the cyborgs, and that was one of her jobs there. And so she's still doing interviews on the internet, and they're really amazing.
I'll have to contact her again and have her back. It's been a while.
Should absolutely get her back again.
Yeah,
she's downloaded all kinds of information, and she's got the linguistic skills to communicate them in ways that people can understand. She's very talented, and she's like a font of information.
Yeah, and not only that, but she knows exactly what companies were involved in Antarctica, what German companies and American companies were involved in Base 211 in Antarctica before they went to the moon and Mars. She has all that information. So she's really a fountain of information. She's incredible.
Everybody get Len's book. You really find out what's really happening.
So
there's no way we can stand up to the forces that control things because we're such little players. All we can do is talk about our thoughts, but there's no the beneficent common narrative that people buy into won't even consider the kind of information we're discussing.
Well, they won't let us have any of the Nazi control of this planet. Won't let us have any of the technologies. But I used an appendix to review all the Nazi technology on the moon and Mars, and I discuss all of it. Mainly the quantum computers, nanotechnology, age regression, cloning, all of that. The regeneration tank. I wanted to make clear what the kind of technology they've got there, and that they won't let us have here. Wow. They have huge spacecraft going all over the galaxy, and a very, very active slave trade, which Corey Good did talk about. And they run the solar system from the moon and Mars. And that includes Earth. That includes us. They only give us a certain amount of technology, only just enough so that we're not too dangerous.
Right. I was talking to Randy, and so he was describing, I was on a panel with him, how the extraterrestrials like our beer and our children's clothes, because there's a lot of small species And I had someone else explain it. They said that the extraterrestrials will invent something like, interstellar space travel, but they'll kind of stop with that. But humans will invent something, and they'll go, well, that's an interesting vehicle. Let me add some wings and make it purple, and because we're naturally creative, so we don't stop with the first generation of an invention, where a lot of other extraterrestrial species will just create it, and now they've got it functioning, and they never improve it. So that's why they like our technology. They think we're very good at building things. We improve. Whatever they give us, we improve.
That's right. That's right. The humans are very much in demand on all these other planets, but they're in demand as slaves.
So some are used as slaves, some are military slaves, some are sex slaves, some are worker grunt slaves, but some are very creative, and we're put to use in the technology and development of
that's the nature of humanity, to be creative.
Right. So that's what it doesn't make sense to me why they have this virus where they're killing us off, because aren't we a valuable commodity for resale in the universe? Something's weird here with the.
Are there factions? Is there even what Max Weber said a long time ago? Any system will develop factions, even if it's a single-headed system. It's inevitable that you have competition for decision making, and so what are the factions? Are there any good guys in the mix of who controls things?
Well, we do have Solar Warden. I think you've heard about Solar Warden, haven't you? I get into that in the book.
Yeah, I'm not so. What I'm not so sure about is whether Solar Warden has the interests of ordinary human beings at heart or not.
The main people in Solar Warden do honor their constitutional oaths, and they are connected. They are devoted to being Earth and being human. But unfortunately, we're not able to challenge. They're not able to challenge the Nazis in the solar system just yet. They're not up to it yet. We do have the spacecraft. We have huge spacecraft that roam the galaxy. Ben Rich talked about that in 1993. You remember that speech he gave in 1993? That we now have the ability to. Anything you can imagine, we can already do, and we can take ET. And we can take ET home. You remember that he said? Right. He said he knew it. He said, but these technologies are locked up in secrets so powerful that it would take an act of God to get them out. He said all that in that speech.
So maybe Karina is God acting.
The coronavirus is God acting.
It could be if you say that. That's what's going to make the secrets come out, because
Well, that is one of the theories going around, that maybe this coronavirus is going to shift humanity, because we were kind of stuck like in a lock system that got more and more perverse. And so I think
the reptilians use different techniques. They use war when it pleases them, and they use disease both. I mean, the Spanish flu. You remember what? You have information on the Spanish flu? Do you know what happened there?
Yeah.
Millions of
people
died.
How is it perpetrated? How did it start?
It started very similar to what happened with coronavirus, I believe. Very similar.
So these viruses come around periodically, and I was listening to something today, and they said, "Oh, this is just beginning. Things are not going to go back to normal. These pandemics are going to come around, probably every couple of years. So we've got to. There's definitely is a new world emerging, if that is true."
Well, they're getting ready. They're getting ready for a robotic takeover, and that's really what this is all about. This is the beginning of the robotic takeover, and they're going to use the cyborgs. They're going to depend on the cyborgs heavily, and just going to be just like the Cylons in Battlestar Galactica. That's what they want to do here. That's exactly what they want to do here. What?
So yeah, when we come back, we'll go into
Alas, Caprica.
Yeah, exactly.
Caprica? So this is Cyborg Wars, but even in Battlestar Galactica, they just kind of all merged and became one, and at the end they kind of sang Kumbaya. You know, they realized, they started having children together. See, I don't know. It's kind of weird, right? Can we breed them, or is that what the Greys are about?
Or are we cyborgs and don't know it?
we already AI. We're already.
Oh no, we're not. We're still human. Their goal is transhumanism. Transhumanism is when the non-humans take over, and that's basically what they're shooting for. Is to take over this planet. That's what they do on all the planets they control. They're in 21 star systems. That's how they run the star systems. The robotic population is run by a quantum computer. The entire population is run by a quantum computer. And I talk about quantum computing in my book.
Okay, so we're going to go into that in the second hour. We're coming up in the break in about 10 seconds here. So we'll talk about what will this world look like when we're all robots, we're all bored, and we're being run by the quantum computer, and we're all transhumans. And is there anything we can do about it? Probably not.
And the last part of the book, when we go through the chapters, that's where you sum it all up. We'll want to hit that too.
We'll hit that too.
Okay. Good. What do we have? 1 more hour? What is it? 1 more hour?
We have one more hour with 5 minutes.
1 more hour, did you say?
1 more hour.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Wadiya will remain a dictatorship. Oh, be quiet. Why are you guys so anti-dictators? Imagine if America was a dictatorship. You could let 1% of the people have all the nation's wealth. You could help your rich friends get richer by cutting their taxes and bailing them out when they gamble and lose. You could ignore the needs of the poor for healthcare and education. Your media would appear free, but would secretly be controlled by one person and his family. You could wiretap phones. You could torture foreign prisoners. You could have rigged elections. You could lie about why you go to war. You could fill your prisons with one particular racial group, and no one would complain. You could use the media to scare the people into supporting policies that are against their interests.
Tune in Monday through Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, for Liberation Nation with Deacon John, where America comes to hear the truth.
I know this is hard for you Americans to imagine, but please try.
Exopolitics will be on from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern on Studio A. Mark Schneider will have guests on that will discuss many important topics, including the state of the world today. However, much of the show will be dedicated to the writings of Edward Albert Meyer. Let me read a short passage from one of his writings. Love is the highest principle of creation, and through it, everything exists in absolute logic. All of nature in its indescribable splendor is nothing but the love of creation, which is expressed visibly. The love of creation is everywhere, because without it, nothing at all would be able to exist. Please join Mark on Ohio Exopolitics from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern on Studio A.
It is no secret that the so-called mainstream media is best described as controlled propaganda. countless news stories are either totally ignored or spun with half-truths, and because of this, essential facts and vital information are often compromised. Join Dr. Ott every Friday night on Studio B at 10 p.m. Eastern and learn why The Story Behind the Story was nominated for a Peabody Award in its second year of producing unparalleled broadcasting excellence in 1997. That is, if you really care about learning the truth.
Transcending time and space, let us take you to the place inside your mind where thoughts divide and mysteries unwind. Join us every Monday evening right here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And you will catch the Fenton Perspective with our great host, Lorian Fenton. Come listen in as she shares her amazing stories from the past to present, along with all of her guest secrets to the future. That's the Fenton Perspective every Monday evening right here from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time, only on Revolution Radio. Oh, and you don't need to expect us. We're already here.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
You are live.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Stargate Cosmos. I am your host, Jen Lessin, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha, Alex Lessin, and our producer is Thomas Becker, also known as a Mad Painter. You're listening to Revolution Radio Studio B, and our guest is Len Kasten. But before we get back to our show, I'd like to remind everybody to please go over to that donation button on revolution.radio. And up on the top left tab, you can make your one-time donation, and you can go to the Patreon button and make your recurring donation. And we do thank you very much for your donations, because that allows us to keep bringing you these shows. Dr. Lessin, what would you like to say before we bring back Len?
Well, we're following the progression of how the Nazis got in control of everything and who the good guys are. And there are some people that respect humanity and what we can do about the situation in which we find ourselves. I hope we'll find out some of that in this part of the class.
So hopefully we'll have a good ending here. But in the meanwhile, what happens if we all get bored, if we all become transhumanists, if we're controlled by the singularity and the supercomputer of the cosmos and the galaxies? And so, Len, tell us about that. What's going to happen when we all get
That's their goal. That's their goal, but I don't think they're going to achieve it. And that's what Penny Bradley did conclude, that was going to happen. But I'm taking issue with her on that because we do have a lot of friends in this galaxy. And they're helping us. They're helping us in many ways that we don't understand just yet. They have upgraded our DNA 22 times since they first created us, and each time we've gotten better and better. And eventually, we're going to get to the point where they're not going to be able to control us anymore. I call that at the last chapter of my book. The last chapter of my book, I call that the legacy of Spock. And I have a picture of Leonard Nimoy holding up his hand with the two, showing his hand with the divided fingers. I think we're going to be okay.
No, I get it. It's like a coherent field of people that can clearly see what's going on and can communicate from the heart with each other. And I think that's happening.
Yes, it is. It is happening. And, it's the virus that's bringing that about in a big way. More and more people are really helping each other. It's really interesting to see the way people are coming out to help other people. That's basically real human nature. That's what we're all about. And they're not going to be able to stamp that out. They can't do it.
The Israelis have relaxed and are letting the Palestinians depend on their living cross back and forth, and just the ordinary people are resuming their friendly, interactive life without under the constraints of we are all one. So that if existentially, we say that if we created this situation for our own growth and development, what are we getting? We're getting a feeling of oneness with everybody, a realization that everybody's health is everybody's concern, that we need to have some kind of minimum basic living condition for everybody on the planet. All these things become so apparent when you're forced to reflect. Everybody right now has been confined. Stay in your house and meditate on your existence, and so it's an opportunity. I guess any crisis is simultaneously an opportunity to have the system break up and regress, or to evolve to a higher level of organization.
Right. The best qualities of human nature are coming out under this virus thing. These hospital workers, the heroism of those hospital workers going to work every day, knowing that they could die, and so many of them have. Hundreds have died. Doctors, nurses, assistants. I mean, but they're hanging in there. We're seeing the best qualities of the human race under these conditions. I don't know. People don't realize it yet, but I can see it. I can see it coming through, and that's why we're going. That's why we're going to we're going to survive.
One of the things that really got me was in California. They and especially in Los Angeles, where I used to live, they were putting the people that were living under the freeway into all the motels and hotels along Century Boulevard. And, it's like, wow, that makes sense. It's wonderful. We say we've solved the housing problem.
The problem is that's human. That's human. That's what I call human ingenuity. It comes out eventually.
That's fun.
I thought okay. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I just, but the other side of it, the seeds of the destruction of the oligarchy are fed by the very conditions that it's creating. It's bound. It's no longer hiding from anybody. It's obvious that we live in a fascist-controlled state. Everybody can see that, and so now you're starting to see conscious organization of intelligent people that see what's going on. There's a coalition of eastern states and western, and there's one in the west too, of governors that have decided that they're going to coordinate their purchasing of necessary equipment.
Exactly.
They were competing with each other, and all kinds of intelligent things that thinking people can create, and so that's bringing up something really good too. We can make network communication and use each other's resources synergistically. That's what we can do, and we're doing it where we can.
I think we're seeing the twilight of capitalism, thanks to this virus.
Oh,
I think we're
really?
I think we're seeing that. The human race is much more than a business proposition, much more, and that's coming out very, very clearly now. As the heroism that's taking place on a day-to-day basis under the impetus of the virus is amazing. It really is amazing.
Right. So this is making us respond and react and really identify with who we really are at the core of our beingness. So are we kind and loving, or are we selfish and greedy? So it seems like people are, like today, there was this 85-year-old lady, she said, I'm out of beer. And so the beer company, or whatever, how old she was, the beer company came and delivered her beer for free.
Well, see, there's a good example right there.
Beer.
That's what I'm talking about right there. You know, the human nature is basically a loving nature when it's allowed to come forth, and they can't really control it. They can't really suppress it.
Yeah, one thing that's really got people that I know are really uptight is people that were applying for asylum are being forced into pens where they're bound to catch the virus. And they're not criminals. They're just people that were applying for asylum, and ICE is still arresting them and moving them around, and separating families, and all these terrible, terrible things that you would expect of Hitler's regime at its height in Nazi Germany, and that's what ICE is doing.
How about the prisons themselves? Being in a prison now is it's a death sentence just to be in jail. And
if you didn't pay parking tickets, you're dead.
Yeah.
What's that?
Oh shit!
If you don't pay your parking tickets, you're dead.
Yeah, really.
Think about it. Years ago, with Botany Bay in Australia, and the 1800s, and so instead of putting people in prisons, they shipped them off to. So I think the new
Georgia.
Botany Bay could be Mars. If we're criminals, if you're a criminal, ship me off to Mars. I don't know. There's got to be another way besides.
That's what they've been doing for years.
People in boxes where they just get exposed.
They've been abducting people and sending them to Mars for many, many years now, since World War II. And turning them into super soldiers, turning them into cyborgs, whatever.
Slaves.
Yeah.
If we're all slaves, like the theory is that we're all slaves anyway. Some are more aware than others that they're slaves or not. But at least we can work for some human rights and basic living conditions. If we are slaves in the slave system, can we have better
organize the slaves?
Organize the slaves for better conditions. Because even as a slave, you have power. You can stop working. Yeah, go ahead, kill me. I'm not going to be your slave, right? So.
Well, Corey Good talks about the slave trade and what's the fact that Solar Warden. You know, you do know what Solar Warden is, I think, don't you?
Our listeners, what Solar Warden is. There's different factions in the space program, right?
We have our own space fleet. Yes, we do. It's run by the Navy, basically, and we have spaceships that are 2 miles long. Some of them roaming the galaxy. But unfortunately, we cannot take on the Nazi powers yet. We're not ready yet. But we do have the technology. As Ben Rich said, we can take ET home, and they're humans. They're humans running these ships. And it's going to be eventually we're going to have the Star Trek civilization. We will eventually get to it.
So what about the species in the universe? I mean, in the galaxy or whatever, we have Pleiadians and Anunnaki. We have other Andromedans and all these other beings that are not part of this system. They have their own governments or organizations. So the Federation of planets is supposed to be a higher level than these systems, that these secret space programs.
Exactly.
Organizations that originated from Earth,
That's
right? So we do have the Federation. And the
Federation. Corey Good talks about the Federation.
So tell us about the Federation from your perspective.
Well, the Federation is the key to the whole thing. I mean, they're not going to let us turn into a bunch of cyborgs. They're not going to let it happen. They've invested too much in us already. They've upgraded our DNA 22 times to bring us to the point where we can now operate computers and drive cars and do very, very complicated things. And when we were Neanderthals, we couldn't do all that. So they're not forgetting about us. And transhumanism is their answer to eventually making us all into robotic individuals and cyborgs. But that's not going to work. It's not going to happen. That's my position. Now Penny thinks it is. Penny thinks that there's nothing we can do. She says that in her introduction that they think they will be spared because they are allied with the Draco. Not likely. And that's the next to last chapter of the book. The last chapter is about the Solar Warden. And
it's interesting. An interesting take on that, if you have a relational perspective, is that we must affect the extraterrestrials that are influencing us by their interest in us. There's something that they're getting from it too, not just subservient. The master is dependent on the slave in some ways, and so I'm just wondering. We got something they want, the M gene or whatever it is. They brought
us along to where we are today, little by little. We are a very creative race.
An investment.
Creative. Yes, an investment in helping them free the slaves in the galaxy. They expect us to start to do our part pretty soon. And what Corey Good said was that now the alien race, the extraterrestrial races that have improved our DNA and brought us to this point, are now stepping back and letting us take over our own destiny. They said we've reached a point now where we're going to be in charge of our own destiny.
Yeah. I think that what it is that we're coming from a compassionate place, a hard place that feels the consciousness around us and the consciousness of the planet, and it feels a oneness in that contact.
Exactly. And so that's the question: is will we triumph or not? Can we defeat the Nazis, the Reptilians, the Archons? And once we've achieved our real higher state of consciousness, none of them are going to be able to control us anymore, because basically we're sixth-dimensional. At the soul level, at the spirit level, we're sixth-dimensional creatures. We're not fourth-dimensional, and the reptilians are only fourth-dimensional. So once we expand our consciousness to a certain point, they will no longer be able to control us, and we're getting very close to that, actually.
If we come down to this vibratory frequency with a purpose, intention, that humans actually choose to come down and be third-dimensional?
I'm sorry, say that again. I can't hear
you. You're saying that we're actually six-dimensional beings. So did humans choose to come down into the third dimension? Are we here to perhaps accelerate lower consciousness?
According to Alex Collier, we are called from a race called the Patal. We're six-dimensional creatures, basically, on a spiritual level. Our physical bodies are third-dimensional, but our souls and our spirits are sixth-dimensional. And so once we reach a certain point in expansion of our consciousness, they will no longer be able to control us at all. They're just going to give up and go away. They won't have any choice.
Wow. That's like in Jungian psychology, the archonic part of our psyche, our subpersonality. Once we recognize it for what it is, and just the vulnerability that it was made to protect us from, and we can just experience it, we're free of it. So that whole thing that's external is also exactly mirrored in what happens in the psyche of a person who's maturing and accepting more and more of themselves, which lets them accept more and more of the selves around them and feel unity with those selves.
Exactly. Corey Good says that they're not ready yet. They're not yet ready to accept us into the Federation. We're not there yet. But that's basically what we're being trained for, is to join our fellow human beings in the galaxy in the Star Trek generation. And once that happens, we will become the Star Trek generation. You know, Gene Roddenberry knew a lot about this.
Right. What do we have to do?
I'm sorry?
What is lacking? They're not accepting us into the Federation yet. What more do we need to do? Are there indicators of what we have to do?
There's still too much selfishness here, and we haven't learned yet that how to really love each other and help each other. But we're getting there. We're getting there, because basically the reptilians are keeping us. They're keeping us in that state of ignorance and dependence. Financially, that's what they do wherever they go, is they install a money system right away, and that's how they keep everybody under control. But eventually we will get there. I believe we will get there. And the last chapter in my book is about that.
So you're saying that they installed the money system?
Of course, that's wherever they go. That's what the reptilians do. That's a reptilian system.
Right. And so greed, we had a guest on a couple weeks ago, and he said that greed is mental illness. And if people were to work on their childhood issues and, relationship issues and religious and cultural conditioning issues and do their psychotherapy, that they would be able to resolve their psychological issues and move past greed, which is a mental illness. So people who hoard, especially things like money, who want more than they can ever use, are mentally ill. That was an interesting conclusion.
Yeah, that's one way to look at it. That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
I thought that I would
how do we get our... Go ahead.
Are we on for another, 30 minutes?
Yeah, approximately, yes.
What do you want to read?
I thought I would read to you the titles. I have an appendix devoted to a review of the Nazi off-world technology. I thought I would just read the titles. Read the titles to what they have, and keep in mind that all of that could be ours once we're free of this yoke. Age regression, anti-gravity craft, artificial intelligence, cloning, free energy, holographic disguise, memory storage and cyborgs, jump gates, mental enhancement, nanotechnology. And nanotechnology is very big. Quantum computing. We have those already, by the way. Neurolinks, quantum mechanics, quantum teleportation, regeneration, replication, smart suits, Stargates and the cosmic web, transference of consciousness, walking through walls, and invisibility. I have that all in the appendix. Review of German Nazi off-world technology. So, those are all the things that we could have here. They already have them on the moon and Mars, okay? They're not going to let us have it. And we're just going to have to take it. That's what's going to have to happen. We already have a computer in Tennessee that has the following. Do you know anything about computer speeds at all?
A little bit, but go ahead. What do they have in Tennessee?
We have a computer called the Titan, Titan. It has a speed of 40 quadrillion floating point computations per second. Can you picture that? Can you picture that?
So how does that compare with what we have?
It's way beyond.
Average, beyond it.
That's quantum computing. We have nowhere near that. But but the military does have the use of those computers already. So that's going to revolutionize everything. Once the quantum computers start to be used all over, technology will be incredible, absolutely incredible. And they're using, and the Nazis are already using, and they're already using that on the moon and Mars.
And the military has technology way beyond what they're letting out for public use. So exactly. We have all these technologies. And what about this secret well, the new branch of the military that Trump announced. Is that just a way of revealing that we've had this program going all along? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, he calls it the Space Force, I believe, right?
Right.
Yeah, the Navy is way ahead of that. The Navy has Solar Warden. They're in charge of Solar Warden, and that British hacker hacked into Solar Warden, and was amazed at what he heard. You know about the fact that he hacked into the naval.
Yeah.
Gary McKinnon.
Very mid to late 90s, and this guy was trying to impress me. He took me on a tour, and he was basically saying, we can hear everything you say, we can listen right through the walls in your dorm, where you live, and so he was kind of bragging. He probably shouldn't be telling me this, but he was taking me on this tour of what we really have. So he was letting me know that technology, and that's where I actually went to an underground base. We have it here on this earth. It's not just in space. The technologies are way in advance of what we have.
It's amazing. It's amazing technology. Absolutely amazing.
It's really amazing.
If you can picture 40 quadrillion floating point computations per second, that should give you some idea of what we have, what the possibilities are.
Good. So somehow, with all this quantum control, the powers that be are letting you write this book and speak about these events, and you're not being messed with by the powers.
Well, I'm free to do what I want. I'm free to do what I want to do. So here's my thought: people, the powers are letting us talk because they want to see how people react to what we're saying. It could be that. Or it could be that they have no choice. That some information has to come through, and it is coming through. And they can't stop it. There are 7 billion of us now on this planet. And I would say most of us are very creative. And the human race is a very creative race. I think that the future of the human race is unbelievable.
Susie Hansen told us that this is a time when people that have been sent, that are latent world peace and love advocates, have been latent in their genes. This is the time that they're going for them to step forth and really be the kind of examples and help people live from the heart and recognize their oneness. And it's like something awakening in the genes of many, many people right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Bernie Sanders is going to be a very important part of the new administration once the Democrats take over. And we will have Medicare. We will have Medicare for all, and a lot of his ideas are going to come into fruition, even though he's not the president. He will his expertise will be valued.
They've started a movement, and so now it's become prominent in our consciousness about the basic minimum needs economy, and that we can't leave homeless people on the streets. That adds to our pandemics. We can't house people in little cells. That adds to our pandemics, and we're going to repeatedly have these pandemics. Maybe that's the upside of the pandemic, is that we realize that we have to treat human beings like human beings.
Well, yeah, we're beginning to realize how dependent people are for medical assistance, and how much of a big chunk of their budget is necessary to keep insured. And eventually, I think it's going to become obvious that we need Medicare for all. That we're not going to be able to do without it.
If you have to have it dependent on having a job, means that when you're fired, you don't have medical.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly.
And also, we need a basic minimum needs economy where people have basic income, so there's no rock bottom, so they don't have to go out in the street. And so that's what came forth through Andrew Yang. And then, the BMI has been kicked around since the I guess it was Martin Luther. He said it, but that goes even further back in time. Somebody else in the 1800s was talking about basic minimum income, and so people are going, a bunch of lazy blah blah. But the theory is that we're all consumers, and so this money they're not going to sit on and put it in the bank. They need it to live on, so the money will go back into the economy. The economy is fueled by we have 7 billion consumers, and they'll have a basic income of X, and that'll basically go back in and fuel the economy. And if we all have basic medical, then we're going to need more medical trained personnel, because right now people are not going to the doctor until they get something horrendous, and they might go when they're dying of cancer. But if we have medical health and care and wellness, we'll go and get our checkups. We'll have a healthier society. And then if we have a more educated society, we'll have more intelligent people out there. Like right now, we have our geniuses that might be, born in a third world country in a little village. But if we have education for all of humanity, we'll look for these geniuses and foster and nurture them and excel and come to this society, which we know already exists through the secret space program, bring that down into our dimensional Earth physicality so we can have the golden dawn age of Aquarius, like been predicted.
Exactly. I think these $1,200 checks are just the beginning, because they're going to have to continue that, and that's going to become the Andrew Yang system. Is we're all going to start getting the basic income. We're more valuable as consumers than we are as producers, because the producing will all be done by machines, and it's already being done by machines and robots. So they're not going to need us for that anymore. So what they're going to need us for is to keep the economy going by consuming, and that's why they're giving us $1,200 checks next week.
We keep consuming, and it feeds the economy. And then, so then the education, the medical, the basic minimum income,
all the Bernie Sanders policies are going to come to pass. It may be a Joe Biden administration, but it'll be a Bernie Sanders, economy. We can't keep up this capitalistic greed system any longer. It's just not working anymore.
We see the capitalism kills not only us individually but collectively, and it kills the planet. Because so we'll get the fossil. That was the last part. So it'll become. We already have the M drive and clean green energy systems. Our governments are suppressing it so we can keep into this capitalistic system, which is killing us individually, collectively, and the entire planet and all the creatures and features. So that will obviously have to end. And so I have a guest coming on next couple of weeks, and he says that they've already started to patent, reverse engineer the systems that already exist in the secret space program. So this M drive engine can replace all the planes, trains, boats, cars with a clean green energy system that doesn't create the fossil fuel pollution. And then we see, as we see now, while we're not driving, flying around, as the skies are clearing up, Los Angeles has the cleanest air on the earth right now, any major city. So, and the animals are coming back, and, they can, the waters are clearing up. So I don't think it'll take us too long if we stop and we switch to clean energy. That it won't be too long before the earth clears up again.
Well, that should happen. It should happen if they can just prevent the reptilians from starting wars and slaughtering each other. Then I think we will be able to get there. That's all reptilian stuff. So all the wars are all basically reptilian.
What do they need? What are they not getting that they want to cause a war?
They want us to kill each other, of course. They want us the lowest human impulses to prevail, survival. Mm-hmm. That's what they're all about. They're just all about survival, whereas they don't want us to go beyond that. And by keeping us.
So is there some way we can help the reptilians? Is there some way? I've had encounters with reptilians, and so there are a lot of Penny Bradley has. What's our friend from Vegas? Misha Johnson. A lot of experiencers have had encounters with reptilians.
And what do you say about them? What can you say about them?
Some of them are nice. Some
They're what?
Are conscious. I think.
Richards talks about an ally of Mark Richards in the rescue at Dulce, who there are independent operators among that race.
Right. So
but you mustn't forget that they are a different species, and as a different species, they do not have a heart chakra like we do. Therefore, they're not capable of love, really.
Right.
They're not capable of love. So if they're not capable of love...
This guy he had loyalty to Richards.
Yeah, they may not have love as we express it, but they may not have love as we express it, but they might have higher... See, what intelligence and consciousness can exist in any avatar, any form. And so some of them have become evolved and conscious. They're even exploring that in Star Trek, I think it was. They had
some of the
Klingons were monks, right? So yeah, in the one of the latest Star Trek series. So we tend to lump people and say they're all, and they put the negative descriptive on them and say they're all like that. But many species are just as complex as humans. And these are species that have been incarnating in form, for many, many billions and billions of years. So eventually, consciousness is, and so consciousness can emerge from any species, even though it might be, what we call reptilian, right? So Misha apparently has a relationship with one of them, and she's had children by him.
Nancy Tremaine.
Huh?
Nancy Tremaine.
Oh, Nancy Tremaine is another experiencer. Has a relationship with
a child too.
Now, what are you calling a relationship? What kind of relationship?
They live as mates.
They've had children. They go on.
He usually maintains his human form.
Regarded as equals.
But when she at home relaxes into his reptilian form, sometimes.
So
I had one percentage.
What percentage is he?
When he is.
What percentage?
She's coming out. She's coming out with her second book with about.
Yeah, I've got to get her back.
It's 50-50. This child is those two, but I don't remember what she said about what kind of reptilian he was. There's several different kinds.
I have one super soldier that when he gets taken out of his human form, he finds himself he's a reptilian general, and he's commanding other soldiers. And so that when they go into their battle on other planets, their form is reptilian. And he's here as a human. He says, I remember my reptilian life, which is on some level simultaneous. It's like many people shift between their avatars. And he says, I enjoy my reptilian family much more than my human Earth family. He says, I'm actually very lonely here. But anyway, so I think it's far more complex than we can even begin to wrap our heads around.
It's a question of what percentage of the blood. It's a question of what percentage of the blood is reptilian and what percentage is human. I mean, if we're dealing with a mixture, it's a question of which one prevails. Yeah. But certainly, the reptilian psychology is totally different from the human psychology. Totally different. They're not really capable of love. They're not really capable of love as we understand it.
Well, I think one of the best ways to understand it, like in McLean's terms, is when the races that were interested in Earth, between Dracos and Homo sapiens, basically Atlanteans, got together and said, we're going to make 12 different humanoid races contributed genetically, and one reptilian race, and to the proto-humans, and one of them came out to be Homo erectus and became one of our ancestors. But in any case, what the reptilians contributed was our brain stem, the part of us that regulates.
That was the deal. That was the deal. We had 12 human civilizations contributing their DNA, and then the reptilians. We agreed to the reptilian brain because the Elohim felt that they could live with that.
That allows us to survive in a tough neighborhood.
Exactly.
and it's all the automatic stuff, and that's where heartless greed is. And so the way to make contact with the reptilian is to get in touch with a part of you that might be greedy. And if you really understand it in human terms, you just need to balance the giver and the taker in you and everything in your heart chakra. It all works out. But in any case, it's okay to have a part of you that wants to stuff and needs to accept things from others. That's okay too. It's when either of those polarities are out of overpower the other. If you're just in giver all the time, you use up all your life force and you start hating the person you're giving to. It's the balance, and that's all you got to do is be centered in your heart, and you can center yourself between everything. And so what we got to do is come to peace with the reptilian inside ourselves, our own instincts. And just say, okay, thanks. I hear you. I may or may not follow what you're doing, but thanks for the communication.
Fortunately, it's not the higher part of us. It's the lower part of our brain. It's overlaid by the rational brain and by the mammalian brain. So it doesn't identify. It doesn't really personify us. The reptilian part of us is the lowest part. And the Atlanteans did not have the reptilian brain. The Atlantis humans were all human, and unfortunately, we have the reptilian brain. We have to deal with it.
Yep.
So, I interacted with one reptilian. And at first, when I was a child, I was afraid of him because he was so different looking than even the Greys. I had interacted with the Greys. But later on in life, I finally had a communication with him, and he apologized for frightening me.
Oh, that's nice.
It was very warm.
Well, maybe he was not all reptilian, was he?
He was pure reptilian. Yeah.
He wasn't part human. Part human.
No, he was pure reptilian, but he came to realize because he communicates with me off and on throughout my life, and so he just came to realize that it's like he just started to identify with the human condition and realized that I frightened you, and I'm sorry for scaring you. And he understood what it was like. I don't know. I don't understand why they're becoming conscious. A lot of different species. There's a thing.
Relationship. Both parties to a relationship are affected by it. Right. That's a coherent field, honey.
Yeah. So they're becoming conscious. They're becoming aware what it's like to be the other person on some level. Now we may be experiencing simultaneous incarnations in many forms on many planets, many vibratory frequencies. And so you too may have an existence as a reptilian. And then you come and have your human existence. You have your gray existence and other forms that we haven't even given names to. And that part of you that is these other creatures bleed through into one coherent field and one understanding of what it's like to exist in form. And so over time, we start being compassionate towards ourselves and other people, and what it's like.
Janet, you and I have had this conversation before, and I'll say it again what I said then. We're totally different species, totally different. Okay, and they do not have the heart chakra as we do. So maybe they can learn to love. It's possible, but it would really be a stretch. It would really be a stretch because all they know how to do now is to dominate and to control. And that's why that's why they're keeping us in the form of slavery here. So, it's possible. It's possible they may have potential to become semi-human. I don't know. It just seems unlikely to me because of their nature. It's their nature not to be human. They're not human. And human beings have basically a foundation of love, and they do not.
Well, we don't really know what the nature is of all the beings in existence. I mean, it's a continuum. There are many ways to be in many different forms. So it's like we can't really label anything because we don't know. All we have is some stories, and we just have a snippet of what it's like to be reptilian. So when we interview other people that have had interactions with other species like reptilians, it's far more complex than what we're getting when we just get a one-sided story. What do you think, Sasha?
I think I think another way of looking at it, you could conceive a holographic universe where everything that there is and isn't is in a fractal form in every other thing. So you're in everything, and everything's in you, and whatever you bring to the fore of your attention, whatever archetype or idea is motivating you, it's all there, and so you are everything, and everything's you, and there's different degrees of access that different people have, and it's all very. If you look at things that way, it leaves you at peace with everything that is, and the things that seem like they're terribly junk right now are just the challenges that are going to help you evolve to the next highest level, which what we're really talking about is unity consciousness. And so what we've got to do somehow is make peace with the cyborgs or the reptilians or whoever they are, and at least appreciate and admire them so they leave us alone. And sometimes that's all they want is to be admired.
Well, they're not going to have any choice but to leave us alone as our consciousness expands. They just won't have any choice anymore because they are basically fourth dimensional. We're sixth dimensional. And so we're totally different. And it is possible that there could be a mixture there. I mean, the Illuminati are a mixture. They're part reptilian. They have a lot of reptilian blood. They appear human, but I just don't think the two races are ever going to be together in any way, shape, or form. I think the human race will flower once they leave us alone. Once they leave the planet, then the human race will really be able to bring on the Star Trek generation.
Yeah. That's it. Basically, we do want a heart-centered planet where we all care about each other and care about the planet, and that's really different than their agenda.
Yeah, totally different. I mean, I don't know. There are mixtures. I agree. There are. So I don't know how those things work out, really. I would think it would be a very difficult combination.
It's the difference between institutions and individuals, and so I think that people should, who are on this planet, including reptilians, should be given choice and belonging to the community of the planet too.
Well,
so what do you know about the Federation?
I'm sorry. Federation was born after the invasion of Lyra. Federation was born after the invasion of Lyra by the reptilians. Reptilians slaughtered 50 million humans on Lyra, and they destroyed 3 planets with their technology. They have amazing technology. And that was the beginning of the Federation, because the humans from Lyra scattered all over the galaxy, and they eventually joined hands and became the Federation. That's where we are today. But it's a federation of humans.
So are the reptilians, have they now joined the Federation?
No.
Has the Federation been able to?
The reptilians are not in the Federation.
Aren't the Klingons really representative of the reptilians?
But the reptilians somehow got it together with the Nazis.
Right, but I'm saying that Gene Roddenberry brought us Star Trek to try to explain how the cosmos is organized, and then the Star Wars is like the Orion Wars, right? So we're seeing it in our fiction, But in our fiction, they're showing, or science fiction, they're showing that they did reconcile, that they did come to another level. And then if you're following the modern series, they're going back into how we met the Klingons, which I think are the reptilians, and how we started getting along with them. I think we can get along with anybody. What we need to get to is the needs base. What do they need? What needs are not getting met?
Now, what moderns were you talking about? What modern shows were you talking about?
The CBS, there's 2 modern Star Treks, and they're going back in time and going forward in time. There's a Picard series, but there's another Star Trek series.
Yeah, I know. The one with the woman captain. What was her name?
Yeah, they're on hiatus right now because of the
Cold Killer.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
So anyway, they have a.
What do they say about the humans and the reptilians joining? What do they say about that?
We know from the Star Trek story that they eventually got along with the Klingons, and the Klingons were kind of like the reptilians, right? So I guess it's time to go back and study how did they do that, but they did get along.
Well, getting along is one thing. Combining is another.
Worf fell in love with the beautiful psychologist.
Right. So in this next series, Worf and what was her name? Deanna Troi are married.
And they have a kid.
Yeah. So they have a child.
Alex.
No, Alex wasn't from Deanna Troi. Anyway, that's Picard picks up, and I haven't been able to watch CBS because for some reason my CBS isn't working. So anybody out there who's watched it, what happened? I didn't get to see the end of Picard yet. I'm working on trying to get.
You got to have CBS All Access. Do you have CBS All Access?
I have it, but it's something with all these people home at once. CBS really needs a high-speed internet connection, and because so many people are home, my internet is slowed down, and I can't do CBS anymore. I can do Netflix and Hulu, but CBS is not working. Nobody can figure it out.
Oh, you can do streaming. Can you do streaming? Are you able to do streaming? Can you stream?
No, it's not for CBS.
Oh, okay.
Netflix is working.
CBS All Access is streaming.
I know it's not working. I keep getting errors every time I try to go in and see how the Star Trek ends and how Picard ends. I don't know how it ends. Go on and watch it. Tell us, man. Because they picked up how Worf got along with the Deanna Troi and they got married. And it's 20 years later. It's after the Next Generation. So I'm not sure how it ends. But anyway, at least in fiction, somehow and then Worf was part of Next Generation. He was the part of the crew. So somehow they were destroying humans and we were all mortal enemies and they're getting along. But I'm missing that piece of the puzzle.
And they joined the Federation.
And they
had new enemies to fight.
Right. Yeah.
Well, did they actually join the Federation?
Yes.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
They were accepted into the Federation?
Yeah, but then there was a revolt, and some of the old people wanted to go back to the old ways, and it goes on. They make a big drama out of everything.
Right.
Yeah. Then you got to again plug your book. How can they get signed stuff from you?
Oh yeah, we've got like a couple minutes. So again, tell everybody the title of your book and.
Okay, the book is Dark Fleet: The Secret Nazi Space Program and the Battle for the Solar System. It's available on Amazon. It's available from the publisher, Inner Traditions, Barnes & Noble, and I think it's being sold in bookstores now too. And I was on Coast to Coast, about a month ago, talking about it. So, but I haven't been on Jimmy Church's. I haven't been on Jimmy Church's show yet. But it was on Coast to Coast. What?
That's
so. Anyway,
so
books out there.
What's your conclusion? We have 2 minutes. So the last part of the book, your conclusion is, tell us what you concluded by all this research, and this is like your 5th book or something. What's your conclusion?
Well, the conclusion is that Solar Warden eventually gets to the point where they're able to confront the reptilians. And that's going to be the final battle. Because Solar Warden already has spaceships that are 2 miles long, already roving the galaxy. We have colonies on many other planets, the human colonies on all these planets. But what we have to do now is we have to get rid of slavery wherever we find it. And that's what the humans that's what the humans are going to be. That's what they brought us along for. That's why they gave us 22 genetic upgrades to get us to the point where we could be partners in this whole struggle to get rid of galactic slavery. That's what it's all about. It's an abomination.
It seems pretty primitive that they would still have slavery when they're such advanced species. So that kind of boggles my mind. But all right,
all the slaves are human. All the slaves are human slaves. They're the ones they've enslaved. We're the ones they've enslaved in all these other planets. So we have to get to the point where we can take over.
And we probably will. Okay, and do you have a website, or
yes, I do.
How can people reach you?
I have a new website. You ready?
Yes. What's your website?
Alien-Secret History. I have it. It's still under construction, but it's still usable. Out there.
Radio at freedomslips.com. And we'll be right back after this message.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? I've just been handed an urgent news story, and I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
On the go? Still want to listen? Don't have one of those fancy phones with too many buttons. Don't know what an app is? Or you don't even care? Well, we got you here at Revolution Radio. Now you can dial in 24/7 to listen to our shows. We have a number for Studio A and Studio B, and best of all, it's free. Don't forget, your carrier charges for your cell phone provider may apply, though, so check with your cell provider to make sure. So ready? Here you go. Get a pen. Here's the number. Studio A is 712-432-6958, and Studio B is 716-748-0112. Thank you very much for listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, the number one listener-supported radio station in the world.
Hey, everyone. It's Barbara Jean Lindsay, the Cosmic Oracle. If you have questions about your past lives or future plans, need answers from the cosmos about your love life or career, or just want to keep your finger on the pulse of the planet, check out my show, The Cosmic Oracle, here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com.
Looking for a nightcap to fill your listening needs? Come join us on Spaced Out Radio with me, Dave Scott, right here on Revolution Radio. Monday through Friday for 3 hours a night, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, we will take you down the supernatural path. From ET contact to the paranormal and all of the spiritual, cryptid, and conspiracy stories in between. You can find us right here on Revolution Radio at spacedoutradio.com, on Twitter at spacedoutradio, and on Facebook at Spaced Out Radio Show. Spaced Out Radio. It's a night of talk and interaction. Are you experienced?
Hello, Karl Marx here. Look at my wonderful hair. Notice how I sweep it back.
Karl?
I call it the 360 sweep. Beard, sideburns, and the magnificent coif.
Karl!
What? Was is this?
You're on the radio. They can't see you.
Oh, yeah, I get confused.
Want to learn more about the Marxist agenda and other important stuff? Listen to The Ultimate Remedy with L.B. Bork, Tuesdays, 6 p.m. Eastern, right here on Revolution Radio.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of